I will recount a story told to me by my friend Robert, who witnessed it with his own eyes when he was a boy in the late 1980s. At that time, Saigon was opening up. Construction boomed everywhere, but Bao Cat, in Tan Binh district, was still an area of new planning. Today, it is full of tall houses and bustling markets. Yet, more than 30 years ago, it was nothing but wild fields stretching endlessly, leading straight to the Bin Hung Hua Cemetery. Children from the neighborhood often played there. The most mysterious place was a wide pond called Bao Cat Lake. No one knew if it had been dug by farmers for irrigation or if it was formed by nature. What people whispered about was far more chilling. Every year someone drowned there, pulled under by a mada, a water spirit that drags the living to their death. Adults warned the children, but kids only half believed and still went out to fish, swim, or catch crickets among the tall grass. Among them was a mischievous boy named James, dark-skinned from the sun, fearless and always leading the pack. One evening, James went fishing at the lake with his brother and some friends. The sunset painted the water red as darkness crept over the fields. Suddenly, his float jerked violently and sank below the surface. James shouted with joy, certain he had hooked a huge fish. He pulled on the bamboo rod, but the line was stuck to something unbearably heavy beneath the water. The harder he pulled, the more it dragged him forward until his foot slipped, and he fell headlong into the lake. The splash echoed across the still surface. James flailed desperately, his head bobbing above the water. Then, horror struck. Something slippery, like vines or cold, slimy hands, coiled around his legs, pulling him down. The children on the bank screamed. His brother leapt into the water and fought to drag him out. At last, they hauled James onto the shore, but his stomach was bloated, his face pale green, and his eyes bulged wide. No breath left his lips. The adults tried frantically to revive him, but it was hopeless. James had drowned, claimed by Bao Cat Lake. Time passed, grief faded, but summer nights still lured the children back. Robert, then 10 years old, remembered one particular night vividly. A heavy rain had just ended, leaving the air cool and damp. Mist hovered over the black surface of the lake. Crickets chirped. The wind whistled eerily through the grass. Carrying baskets and flashlights, the boys crept through the reeds, snatching crickets and laughing nervously. Suddenly, from the tall grass behind, a small figure darted out and snatched a cricket. One boy, walking at the rear, thought it was a stranger stealing his catch. He lunged forward, ready to fight for it, but when his eyes adjusted to the moonlight, he froze. It was James. James, the boy who had drowned months earlier. His face was corpse pale, his eyes lifeless. Water dripped from his tangled hair, his clothes soaked and clinging, strands of slimy weeds hanging from his arms and legs. He stood there, lips curling into a twisted, ghastly smile. The sound that came from him was not laughter, but something hollow and cold, like a voice rising from the depths of the lake. Then, without warning, James turned and slipped back into the darkness of the reeds, vanishing instantly. The boy screamed in terror. The others rushed over. Before they could react, another scream erupted. Someone had fallen into the lake. Robert saw his friend thrashing in the moonlit water, clawing at the reeds. "Something's grabbing my legs!" he shouted, voice cracking with terror. He struggled, but invisible arms dragged him downward. The children on the bank stood frozen in horror. The boy in the water kicked desperately until his hand finally seized a branch jutting from the shore. He clung to it with every ounce of strength, gasping, dragging himself onto dry land. He collapsed, shivering, drenched and trembling, his breath ragged. Then he looked at what he was holding. In the pale moonlight, it wasn't a branch at all. It was a human bone, white, dried, filthy with mud. The boy screamed in horror and hurled the bone back into the lake before fainting dead away. After that night, no one dared go near Bao Cat Lake again. The adults whispered more insistently about the water spirits, Mada that drown the living to replace themselves. They said James had become one of them, forever bound to the black water, waiting for another victim. Robert, now an adult, still trembles whenever he recalls that night. He remembers James's hollow eyes, that grotesque smile, and the bone glistening in the moonlight. He told me this story with a shaking voice, as though the terror still lingered. And I believe him, because some spirits never leave the water. A true ghost story from Vietnam. If you believe in such tales of the supernatural, make sure to subscribe to True Ghost Encounters so you won't miss the next chilling story.